Okay. It looks like people are in. Is that right? Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. We can go ahead and get started. I just want to start with a roll call vote here. So Mr. Swaim,
Yes.
Mr. Smith. Oh,
Unmute here.
and Ms. Akers Moore here. I don't see Robbie, so we can still go ahead and get started with 7 o'clock. Am I forgetting anything, Elizabeth? Are we good to go? Great. Well, let's start. 7 p.m. WH Walden LLC. Who is here presenting for them?
Good evening, Rich Harrington,
Hi,
Tom
Rich.
Falwell.
I could get started just at the introductory, if I might. Thomas Falwell from firm of Combs Newbury here in Concord. We're acting as counsel for the property owner in petition of WH Walden LLC. The application before you seeks a special permit under site plan review for a proposed second-story addition to the building and incident to that relief from parking and some parking design standards. I'm not sure if Elizabeth has brought you up to speed, but we had a productive hearing Tuesday evening before the planning board seeking to obtain obviously the favorable consideration from them and a positive recommendation for favorable action from your board on the application. The planning board didn't take action on Tuesday evening, but continue the hearing till February 21st for us to make some minor modifications to the site plan, mostly relating to some changes to the landscaping plan that result of further consideration by a landscape architect, Deb House, to some of the planting materials and also some discussions that she'd had with Delia Kay with respect to some of those issues. They also requested we consider a few what I would call tweaks to the site plan, which are under consideration. And none of those changes to the plans that were discussed, if made, would be substantive in nature and or alter the design components, elevations, or floor plans of the building as shown on the plans filed with you and as previously approved by the Historic Districts Commission. Given that, and with your permission, we're ready to make our presentation to you this evening, understanding that no final action will obviously be taken by your board until you get the planning board recommendation. If you find that process acceptable, let me introduce, if I might, the project team. Rich Harrington, as you know, is project engineer. With tonight's call for WH Walden LLC, Chris and Edie Hill, who own and operate Keller Williams Realty Boston Northwest that currently is at 200 Baker Avenue. And Frank Widmeyer, who was the other member and manager of the LLC. The plan is that Keller Williams's offices will be relocated to the 59 Walden Street when the project is completed. Also here with you this evening should be, and I'm looking to see amongst all of the names that are up here, but project architect Andy Liverwood and Michael Lubeck from Design Science. As I mentioned, Deb House of Light Hall Company is the landscape architect and also certified arborist. And our general contractor would be Mark Leonetta of Nagog Construction. With that introduction for the team and that background, I'd like to turn things over to Rich Harrington to start the presentation.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. You able to see my screen? So,
Yes.
See
okay,
it
great.
small.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay,
there we go.
perfect. Okay, good.
Just an overall, we're looking on Walden Street and we're adjacent to the town parking, and this is just a cover sheet, would provide some general information of on-street and off-street parking that is utilized by many businesses around the area. And we're located right here on the edge of the town center. And we're a limited business district, which means that they've already lowered the maximum height of the roof. They've have to give them compliments, but with the adjustments they made, it still allows for us to proceed with the second floor addition and also to seek the relief from parking. When we add a second floor, we have enough parking on site of 20 spaces, and that's for the first floor and the new second floor. Then the third floor at the basement, you still need to count towards zoning and parking. But that's going to consist of the lunchroom and extra Zoom meeting room, 2 additional offices in the basement, and some other storage and utilities and bathrooms. So as far as the everyday operations, we have enough parking on the site, and that's been memorialized with the staff and the applicant taking counts every day over a few months of time to support that they can be on the site without demands for off-street parking. Our property, as everyone probably already knows, is it's 2 driveways. So you enter on the right-hand side of the building and you go in a counterclockwise direction around the parking lot, around the back of the building and out the other side. We have parking across the street, 3-hour and 15-minute parking with the businesses and daycares around us. It's already been fine-tuned also as far as those time measurements. To fast forward, the angle of the parking that we show on our plan is very close to what's there today. We had a plan that has been reviewed by the fire department, and thank you to the town planner also for their efforts in coming up with a plan that also is acceptable and supportive from the Natural Resources Commission. So what we have is a process where Delia has asked us to remove all the pavement from the 25-foot buffer zone. So at the back is Mill Brook, which flows in this direction to a head wall, and the church has a path going over to that side. There's a bank, edge of wetlands, and this is a 25-foot distance from that bank and wetlands. So there's a stone trench there today that would remain, and we've narrowed down and angled the parking to match what's out there today, so that we're seeking relief to the angle of the parking and the couple aisle widths that are better than what's out there today. But it just provides a vehicle or opportunity for us to remove the pavement, which is what was one of the requests of the Conservation Commission. Everything in the back of the building is also within the floodplain conservancy district, which is this dashed line going along the back. So what we were able to do is we are able to lower the grades or carve out areas to improve on stormwater, and where we can, we're going to expand roof dry wells on each side. Then as we move forward in the construction part of it, the driveways will remain active. Any stockpiling and things of that nature have been asked to be protected 50 foot from the edge of the wetlands, and the area construction will be in from the backyard portion of it. And effectively, what we're doing is when we seek relief, we're required to provide as many parking spaces on the property that comply with the dimensions of your zoning bylaw, which we've done at 20. And then we circle back and discuss it with fire, conservation, and the town planner to find a product that provides that same number of parking spaces, but also meets the needs of everybody in a collective spirit. So the master plan encourages more commercial development. This relief will allow that to occur. And like to do is hand it over to Andy, the architect, to discuss the building.
All right, thanks, Rich. I'm gonna share my screen here. And we'll go to this one here. I'm just going to take you through several quick slides. So this is, I hope you can all see this. This is the, what I always think of as the Concord Cooperative Bank at 59 Walden. What we are going to be doing is, so these are the existing elevations, and the shaded areas represent what we're taking off, so that we can add a second floor. And as you can kind of see at the side elevation here, we're actually going down. The ceiling height in there in the first floor, the banking floor, if you've ever been in there, is quite tall. It's at like 12 feet. To get our second floor in within the required height limitations, we're making that ceiling around 8 feet. So we're basically taking the roof off and a couple of feet down from of the main first floor walls. So the new building will look like this. And I'll show you some renderings in a minute, but basically a white clapboard building, and getting rid of all the brick that we're used to seeing. So one of the big questions has always been, so how much taller is this building going to be? And this is kind of a good representation showing the existing height of the building and the new building on the right. And if I zoom in a little bit for you, the blue line represents the new height of the building. So it's 4'9" taller than the existing building. So what I want to show you next is out of the way. So these are some 3D renderings of what the thing will look like. And I'll just kind of zoom in on each for a moment here. So the front will look like this. As Rich said, the two driveways remain in effect. Basically, the front will be rebuilt, but remains as it is with a stairway, handicap ramp. We are adding a new second means of egress out of the main floor here, which there's a stairway going to the second floor and a stairway coming up from the lower level that everything can dump out here. Similar view of the front, just looking at the west-hand side. We've updated some lighting things. At one point, we had some wall packs on this side of the building. We've changed that out, working with HDC and the planning board, that we're now going to have just a small bollard light here to kind of light up the driveway here. And that, let's see. So the back, and looking up that same side, there's that bollard light, the back of the parking lot. We are going to have a couple wall packs up here and a lantern type light at the back door. And the last kind of corner is facing the residential neighbor here, and a bollard light on this side too. Now, what is not shown on this drawing is this sort of board fence. There's an existing one that goes from the end of this little picket fence, so same sort of 5-6 foot high, that runs all the way down here. And we just took it out of the rendering so you guys can see the building. But that is there, and the bollard light will be shielded. We're going to put a shield on the back of the light, and will also be shielded by the board fence, so the light won't bother the neighbor. We're going to have mechanical equipment in the back of the building that will be shielded by a low fence. And that's about it. If there are any questions.
That's great. Any questions from anyone on the board?
I have two. Will the parking be available to the public, or will you be able to control that it's only for the employees and customers of Keller Williams?
Rich, you want to take that?
Sure. It will be private.
If you're talking, I can't hear you.
Oh, so it'll be private.
Okay.
Just for the the employees and the customers, if they do visit the site as a broker office.
And the second question I'd, Rich, is on the new area for that 25-foot protection on the buffer.
Yes.
between the pavement and that buffer, how do you keep cars from going on to that 25-foot?
Yes, you're right about that. We talked about that earlier with the landscape architect. We're going to provide like a level surface about 4 feet wide on the shoulder. We have a painted white line a foot inside off the pavement like you do in the gutter. And we're only going to go down about a 6-inch depth and have plantings there also. So you'll have a 3 to 4 foot height presence of shrubs. And
Okay,
then we'd have a shoulder about 4 feet wide like you normally see on a driveway.
great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one, I think, which is, so I just want to confirm that the only relief, I mean, we have a site plan approval here generally, but the only specific relief you're asking for is parking? Is that
Oh.
correct?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Whoever-
dimensional parking angles, some aisle widths. So there's about 4 things associated with the angles of the parking and then the relief from the number of parking.
Right. I'm sorry, I was using parking generally,
Oh, sure. Yes,
As-
yes. Just
as
everything else
opposed to-
conforms.
as opposed to height or setback or anything like that.
Right. Correct.
I know you already mentioned this, but can you just point out what the planning board is, what you've changed for the planning board? Or what will be changed for the planning?
What will be changed? So there'll be more plantings in this area that's pavement today.
Okay.
And we're going to basically add some more shrubs. And we'll also have some more stormwater recharge to the extent that we can provide that. They've already updated and shown you the light locations, the bollard lights. And then there's 5 roof drywalls around the side, so it's just more cleanup and maintenance aspects of it. There was discussion about whether a bicycle rack or an electric vehicle charging station was needed on the back when there's already those features near the post office and behind, and also the Kai's Road lot. We're trying to be sustainable. We have the heat pumps for heat and the foam insulation, new windows, et cetera. And this was created to be a limited business for a reason. They don't want it to be as active as, because it's transitioning to residential housing and there's no on-street parking past here. So with contract workers and not really multiple full-time employees, the use of an electric vehicles charging station here seems to be unnecessary or not beneficial when they're already on the other side of the post office and generate revenue for the town. So that was just one thing that we're talking about as far as the checklist of sustainability.
Okay, but for the planning board, in terms of layout for the parking spaces and turning
No
radius.
change, no
landscaping,
change at all.
Okay.
So it's more cosmetic and features of landscaping and lighting.
Got it. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just have
Yeah.
one more. Sorry. Maybe
no,
this
go
is for, maybe this is for Elizabeth Hughes. I'm not sure if she's on. You know, what's the not the enforcement, but I mean, we're basing parking and a lot of other things based on a lot of data about the current use and the current number of employees and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just trying to remind myself or refresh my recollection as to how that plays out over time. If this business were to expand, for example, and add additional employees, if it were to change, there would be a change of use here. Is all that sort of then would require a new special permit? Is that?
So the special permit that gets granted is for this project, this use. There was a change of use. The relief from parking does not extend to a different use.
And
Yeah.
just an expansion of the number of employees, would it, or that sort of thing, is that? And again, I'm not familiar enough. I didn't go through all the plans to figure out if they had extra office spaces, but even so, you could hotel or whatever. So I'm just curious about.
So the planning board did specifically discuss the nature of the business, the nature of real estate offices and the change in how real estate office function. People, you used to have to go into the office and look through, different pictures and stuff, and that evolved. And then with COVID, it has evolved even further as far as people, don't visit the real estate office to have meetings anymore. They're either at a client's house or by Zoom. So the planning board did talk about that. One board member did specifically ask, the board looked at the office logs that were provided as far as part of the justification for that relief from parking, and I'm going to say somewhat of the transient nature of real estate agents these days. The board member asked, well, if there's 16 people, coming to the site at, various times, the most being 16 people, but there's a lot more office space. The applicant can, provide more detail than what I'm giving you, but basically it's kind of no different than any professional office. Everybody wants their own space, so broke agents may be there, a couple of hours, a couple of times a week, but they want their own space. They actually, as far as the whole real estate office, those agents rent their office space. That was also discussed Tuesday night by the planning board. But the planning board did discuss the limited business district is limited in the uses. It's much more restrictive than, let's say, Concord Center business as far as the types of uses that can be at this location. And over the years, the previous property owner discussed with the planning board numerous times, trying to think of, other type of uses that might go in this space since it was vacant for so long. A real estate office, especially with the nature of the business and how it has changed with the internet and then with COVID, the board felt that this was an appropriate use for the site, and that the parking with 20 parking spaces was sufficient.
Great, thank you.
Answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Oops.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, quickly, Ravi, you're here?
Yes, I am here.
All right, there you go. There's my roll call vote for Ravi Faya, who is here. So yeah, I mean, as we all know, we're going to continue this. We'll get the recommendation from the planning board and we'll vote after we get that. I will open it to public comment, and we can maybe have a little more conversation, but expect us to revisit this. So if I can go ahead and open a public comment. I don't see everyone, but anyone see anyone?
No.
I see no one. I'm going to close public comment. That's great. That was very helpful overview. I don't have any other questions at this time. I think the board says they do not have any other questions at this time. So I think we will wait to get the report unless anyone on the board has anything else to add. Okay, so let's continue this until Haley, Elizabeth, when are we continuing this till?
Like March 23rd or something?
Is it March 23rd?
Weird.
Haley?
Yeah,
March-
sorry. I had my mute on. March 23rd is the next meeting.
At 7 p.m. We don't.
7:15.
7:15. Okay. Can I get a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Smith,
Night.
Mr. Swaim,
Aye.
Ms. Akers Moore, aye. Thank you very much. Not a very exciting way to end, but thank you all.
Thank you.
You.
Right.
Right.
All right, we're 7:26. All right, great. Before we start this hearing, we have to discuss who is voting on this. Elizabeth, you can talk about this a little, but the general, what has always been done in the past is that full members vote, associate members only vote if there is not a full member to vote. So in this case, the voting members would be me, be Jim, and then the question is between Tom and Robbie, who votes on this. I'm open to discussion on that. Elizabeth, I don't know if you have anything to say on that, or if Tom and Robbie want to.
Nope, the only thing I need is to remind Jim, Haley will send you the evidentiary review for the one meeting that you watched the video on.
Okay, I did watch it.
Well, I
And-
think I have some concerns that
I'm
hadn't been addressed with this project, so I'd like to vote on it.
And I'm happy to defer. Robbie's been on it longer because I can make my comments and then you guys can do what with it, what you will.
Okay, I think then let's, if everyone's happy with that, looking at Elizabeth and potentially town council, we're good with this since you're here. So great, let's go ahead and get started. 7:05 Corey North. Why don't I welcome back. I think we should probably start with what you submitted about the height. Why don't we go there first? And then kind of, I don't think there's been any other major updates. We have the height, and then we have the report that we'd asked Elizabeth put together with Delia, talking about the benefits of this project. So. Mr. Sorry, Mr. Clausen, whoever is speaking.
Well, I just wanted to introduce myself, Chris Clausen with Corey Northrow, the applicant here. And tonight I have with me Bill Henchy, our counsel, and Matt Leidner, our civil engineer. And per your request, I think Mr. Henchy can talk about his memo that he submitted to your board that deals with height.
That's great. And I should mention also that we have town council on, so we can direct questions to him as well. So, Mr. Henchy.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Nice to see everybody again. Very nice to see Mina. It's good to put a face with the name. We've spent some time on the phone discussing this matter. Matt Leidner is here with us today. Matt prepared, at my request, an analysis of the existing base grade elevation at this location. Just to refresh the board, and you have my letter, so I won't repeat everything I said in there. But the last time we were here, there was considerable discussion about the height. There is an application for a height waiver request pursuant to section, and I had it handy just a moment ago, but it's under section 10 of the zoning bylaw, which allows the board to grant a height waiver provided that there is no detriment to the public good. We talked about this an awful lot last time, and I touched on during the discussion at the last board meeting, our view that what was really happening here was not an application for a height waiver in the sense that we were building up the site, but rather our view has always been that we are proposing to restore the site to its prior base elevation, and then build structures that conform to the zoning bylaws height restrictions at that level. So Matt Leidner went ahead and did this work, and you have his letter and you have my letter, but the Reader's Digest version of all of that is that the zoning bylaw in section 6.2.11 contains a definition of height and how it is measured as being the base for a new structure, as it is the base elevation that existed prior to any grading or mounding. Let me be precise about it. The base elevation is defined in section 6.2.11 in the case of new structures as, quote, the average elevation of the ground at the location on the site where the new building is to be placed prior to any grading or mounding. So without getting into all of the details, and Matt is available here to answer questions. Matt has provided to the board a report that essentially confirms our view of this, that the base elevation as defined in the zoning bylaw would be at approximately elevation 170 across most of the site where the buildings are proposed. And as shown on the plans, the top of foundation elevations running from left to right across the site plan, so I guess that would be from south to north, are at elevation 160.5, dropping down to elevation 145.5. So utilizing the base elevation definition that's in the zoning bylaw, we're in a cut condition all across the board. And Matt pointed out in our internal conversations earlier today that even without any restoration, the duplex that is on the left-hand side of the site plan as you look at it does not need any height waiver whatsoever, even with the existing elevation. That's in a cut condition, even relative to the existing elevations. In addition to that, with the assistance of Ms. Hughes, we were able to review the zoning bylaw article from the 2015 town meeting where this definition was adopted. And in my discussions with town council, I've sort of made the point that, look, we see these kinds of definitions down here in the Cape frequently because landowners here will often attempt to fill a site and then go away for a little bit and then come back and take advantage of the new height as contained in the fill. And the explanation under article, I think it was Article 17 of the 2015 town meeting, makes very clear that that's exactly what was going on here. The description of the article states that, quote, as development in the town continues, property owners and developers are bringing fill to raise the elevation or expand the footprint of a house into an area that was previously avoided because of steep slopes or to mound a septic system. While these homes technically meet the 35-foot limitation, they're often out of scale and character with the existing neighborhood and can appear to tower over adjacent homes. And the language chosen is clear and unambiguous in that article. It's for a new building, it's the average elevation of the ground prior to any grading or mounding. And we've also made reference to the building code definitions of grading or mounding. Grading is an excavation of or fill or combination thereof. And the term excavation is defined as the removal of earth material by artificial means, also referred to as a cut. Now, town council and I have gone back and forth on this question a reasonable amount. And I think, I don't want to put words in Mina's mouth, but I think I can articulate where he comes down, and he'll certainly correct me if I misstate it. I think that town council's view is that our interpretation of the height definition is certainly a plausible interpretation of the language chosen by town meeting. In addition, I think that Mina would agree that provided that we do not restore the condition of the site to a height above the previously existing base elevation, that we are not engaging in a conduct which would constitute a detriment as defined under the bylaw and under section 10. I think Mina feels that there could be another interpretation of the language, namely that perhaps the town meeting intended it to be the base elevation for the particular project. I think that's the only area where he and I have any disagreement, because I don't see that language anywhere in the definition that was adopted by a town meeting. So I think he and I are maybe slightly apart on this question, but I think Mina would agree that the interpretation that we put forward is certainly a plausible interpretation of the height limitation in the zoning bylaw. So there it is. Our view is that we do not need a height waiver based upon the definition of the base elevation and Matt Leidner's research. And then, Madam Chair, he's certainly available to answer questions about that. We have requested the height waiver at the suggestion of staff And the board certainly can consider that. That's in the application. And we would suggest that we're not engaging in any conduct which would constitute a detriment to the public good. Our view is that we are restoring this site. The excavation that took place here occurred at some point in time after 1995 in the town of Concord, and all we're proposing to do is to restore the site to an elevation that frankly is lower than it was previously, and then to place the structures on top of that restored elevation. And as we presented in our earlier discussions, essentially in all cases, either equal to or at a cut elevation relative to the ridge that is there now. So I think I can stop there and.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Very, very clear. And I'm gonna ask Mina to go ahead and say whether he agrees with what you just said.
Yeah,
Your characterization, what he thinks.
yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Mr. Henchy's trying to lay this out, and I do largely agree with it. I'll just sort of put it in my own words for the board's sake, because I think there's really a couple of different things to look at here. First,
I'm sorry, Mina, just because we got lawyers in the room anyway, why don't you make sure you identify yourself for the record?
oh, I apologize. Sorry. Mina Macarius from Anderson and Krieger, Town Council. Thank you, Jim. My apologies. The first thing to keep in mind is I think that I will just sort of state our disagreement first, because I don't think it's going to, it may not be material to your determination is the point. The only slight disagreement we have is, as Mr. Henchy said, I do understand his reading with respect to the phrase any grading or mounding, and looking to when that grading or mounding might have happened and sort of going back to a natural base elevation. I do think that a court could reasonably find that the grading or mounding would be one either associated with the project or proximate in time to it, simply because it may be in some cases very difficult to tell whether the base elevation had changed over history for hundreds of years, et cetera. That being said, I am not sure that that first of all, that this case is really the one where that ought to be interpreted for a couple of reasons. One, the grading that did happen here, while not particularly for this site, was relatively recent, and as the applicant has provided some evidence of what the natural elevation was before, that makes the choice of words a little bit harder to suss out which of those two. More importantly, and I think this is where Mr. Henchy and I do agree, is what is the applicable standard that you're reviewing. This is a PRD that's before you. And so while the definition of height comes from Section 2, the test for a waiver, to the extent one is needed, it actually comes from Article 10, Section 10, excuse me, of the bylaw, with respect to the PRD portion. And in Section 10.2.7, as Mr. Henchy said, relief from the maximum height of a building may be granted, quote, provided the board finds the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood and without derogating from the intent and purpose of this bylaw. That differs slightly, but in an important way, from the waiver that would be provided under Section 6 of the bylaw, the more general portion for height waivers, in which, in addition to the substantial detriment standard, and which is identical, there is also a requirement that the board find a literal application of the requirement would be unreasonable because there are no reasonable alternatives available. So the key point there is that you do not need to and should not be looking to see that there's no reasonable alternatives. It's only the portion of the waiver standard having to do with substantial detriment. I just want to be clear. I obviously can't weigh in on whether or not you find, ultimately, it's your decision whether you find a substantial detriment to the neighborhood. However, substantial detriment to the neighborhood, when that standard is in zoning bylaws, you need to be able to point to facts, actual facts that show a distinction between the rest of the neighborhood and actual harm to protected interests under a zoning bylaw. And that's where we sort of come back to the first point. So even if a waiver is necessary, and as I mentioned, I think there's a plausible reading of the bylaw where it is, even if a waiver is necessary, it is perfectly reasonable for the ZBA to consider in whether or not to grant the waiver that issue of how long this site has been graded, the fact that even though it might not have been graded in connection with this particular project, it has been graded relatively recently in history. You could also consider the relative heights of other buildings and the effects of the grading, as I think Mr. Henchy's been calling it, the sort of the cut issue as part of how you assess a substantial detriment. So just to be clear, at the end of the day, what you're applying is only the substantial detriment standard for the, if you decide that a waiver is needed, you're only applying the substantial detriment. And I do agree that there is a pathway where no waivers need at all, although I would urge that whatever you do in a decision, you may want to address both issues anyway.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Madam
Can
Chair?
I, go ahead.
No, I just want to keep our game of ping pong going for 1 second, then I'll stop. The only additional distinction I would make with what Mina just said is that we've submitted pretty clear evidence of when this grading took place. The equivocation that Mina has focused on from day one is, well, when do you know when the grading took place if you go back to the beginning of time, and is that a reasonable interpretation? And here, we know what happened. This land was used as a gravel pit, and Matt Leiter has submitted the evidence of when the grading, the excavation.
Yeah,
took
I heard Mina say that actually, that it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Mina, but that it's recently, in relative years, this was a recent grading. So yeah.
Correct. The historical piece that I'm mentioning is that may be one reason to have to look to more than just the plain words of the bylaw to try to interpret what any grading or mounding means. But that's precisely what I mean by this is sort of an odd case where we do know where non-project related grading or mounding.
We're not saying 200 years ago, maybe this was a Native American something site. This was cut. We know when it was cut, and it was in the recent past.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Let me go ahead and to the other three lawyers on the board. Have at it. What would you like to discuss about this? It's a very compelling argument to me that it may be that the waiver is not needed, but even if it is, the standard is hard to. It would be hard to deny the waiver.
Though I won't be voting, may I be heard?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's Tom Swaim, associate member of the board, but not voting for this evening. I would urge the board that they grant this permit, and that I believe the PRD section 10, the special permit sections and site plan sections all are in favor of this project. And for the following reasons that I would recommend it were I voting. One, it improves a blighted site, which was used as a gravel pit. Secondly, the applicant has made several adjustments to the location of the buildings in response to the board's comment. You'll remember about some of the on the left-hand side, the duplexes. Given the uniqueness of the terrain of the site, that is the artificial lower level of the ground surface, relief from strict adherence to the height restriction is appropriate and consistent with the provisions of 6.2.11. I happen to agree with the argument made by the applicant that he may not need a waiver, although I would urge the board to grant the waiver so that they have the benefit not only of the waiver, but they can take the legal position if that ever comes up. As I happen to agree that I think the way it's being interpreted would suggest that the height is not an issue and a waiver is not needed, though were I voting, I would vote also to give them the waiver as well. Now, relief may be granted where literal application would be unreasonable, as there is no reasonable alternative available, and the relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood. The alternatives, which from my perspective.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you there because Mina, sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth. Were you going to say the same thing?
I'm just going to say the same thing.
So as Mina pointed out, that is under section 6 where we should not be looking.
Right. Okay,
So-
then All right, then I'll
Well,
pass
the only
Y.
thing I would say, the alternatives part there, the substantial detriment, speak on to, but we
Okay.
do not need to go into the.
Okay, good. Then, if I don't need to deal with that, cited substantial change. The project underwent extensive review, as we know, by the planning board, which recommended approval of the special permit. It found that it was harmonious with the development in Sudbury and will not detract from the ecological and visual qualities of the area. That's actually in the planning board report. It also gave detailed review to the height issue as 10.2.7 refers to. The PRD standards, of which there are many, were met by this project. Meeting all PRD standards is noteworthy, in my opinion, and positively important and impacts my position on this project. The stormwater system was found by the planning board to be, quote, a benefit to the adjacent wetlands and the town's municipal well field. And I think that's important to keep in mind because some of the input from neighbors, interested folks, raised some issues about that. While the property was subject to extensive clear cutting, the applicant will be adding, in my view, a significant number of trees and shrubs, and quote, the site will be fully revegetated to maximize carbon sequestration. The Board of Health regulations regulating septic systems will be met, and water flow is away from White Pond. And proposed leaching fields are outside, quote, zone 2 to the Concord White Pond wells. There will be a real estate tax benefit to the town based on the information we had. I do note in the planning board report that notwithstanding, the planning board found it, quote, is not consistent with other recent PRD developments, end quote. The planning board still recommended the project. That the project doesn't fall into a predetermined box should not, in my opinion, be counted against it. Rather, does it meet the site plan and special permit standards set out in the zoning bylaw? And is it consistent with the input of the boards and departments and their review and recommendations? The answer is yes, in all instances. I think this project deserves an affirmative vote of the board. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swam. Well put. Let me put it to Ravi or Jim. Any comments?
I mean, are we just talking about the height waiver here? Or are we talking about everything?
Well, Tom brought up some other things, but yeah, why don't we start with the height, Robbie, and see if you.
Yeah, you know, I brought that up 2 meetings ago. The distinction was 6 and 10 to make the point that it was easier to grant the height waiver under the PRD standard. And I think that I would not have a problem granting the height waiver under the PRD standard. But I did raise concerns about the height at the last meeting for other reasons, which, you know, the bylaw does say that the site should not detract from the visual quality of the area. And in the past, you know, we have to find the special permit factors as well, one of which is neighborhood character. Oftentimes, the massing of the buildings is really what neighborhood character boils down to. And here, what we're hearing from the public on both those factors is a very strong voice of, we do not like the way that these houses are going to look from where the neighbors are sitting or walking or hiking or enjoying the ecological qualities of the area. So that's why I brought up the height. And I, you know, in the past, we've had applicants be open to lowering the height of whatever design they initially came to us with. You know, their architects have redrawn the plans, brought it down 3-4 feet so that the height isn't as much of a factor in the massing that we're looking at. Isn't as much of a factor in the visual detraction that we're looking at. And so that would be where I was hoping the applicant would come back to us on that. The other point that I very much agree with town council on is this isn't the case to litigate what the meaning of our bylaw around base elevation is. I don't think it's relevant to this decision. I would give a height waiver, but I want height addressed to get me there on those other factors that I need to find to approve the project.
Okay.
Uh,
Mina, do you want to respond to that?
Well, it's not so much a response, but, and I don't want to, Jim or Elizabeth, I don't want to cut you off before you speak, but I just want to make one more point, since Tom has sort of given you his view on all of the issues that I was going to save for later. It's important here, and because I watched the tape from the last meeting, the issue about visual character came up. And again, it's important to locate the words in their proper context in the bylaw. The reference to visual character, visual qualities of the area appears in section 10.1. That's the purpose section of the bylaw, of the PRD section of the bylaw. Thereafter, in section 10.2, there are the standards laid out. And I don't need to repeat them all, but tract size, permissible density, dwelling units. This is where we eventually get to height as a particular objective measure. Purpose sections of zoning bylaws are just that. They define the purpose. However, the specifics of the bylaw and the standards are what ultimately need to be met to show that an applicant has met the requirements for what's being asked. If the objective standards, or sometimes slightly subjective standards, admittedly, in the other sections, don't ultimately meet the purpose, that's not a reason to say that a project should be denied. It may be a reason to go back to town meeting to better align those two things. But if all the standards are met, it is my view that that's what you're looking for, not more holistic tying back to the purpose. The purpose helps perhaps when standards are a little bit less objective, might help you interpret more ambiguous language within a standard. But for instance, just to be clear about this, and again, with respect to the height, if a height waiver is granted, 10.2.7, I believe, is that section simply is met. There is no going back to determine whether or not it is met and harmonious with the neighborhood or detracting from visual character. That standard is simply met. I think that's taking the planning board's recommendations into account. I think they walk through the standards, if I remember correctly, with that in mind. So just as a framing, as you all discuss and deliberate.
Let's follow that up. Ravi, if you follow that up and you take the purpose as kind of instructive but not determinative, how do you land on the other determinative parts of section 10?
Right. I don't dispute that the minimum standard has been met for what you're required to have for PRD, but if all you have to do is tick the minimum, is there any discretion for the zoning board of appeals to say no to any PRD?
Well, I think we can get, let's leave that on the table for the minute. I mean, I think that.
Yeah, and I still made the point
the
that's also why I raised the 11.6 factors, because we still have to grant a special permit and make those findings here.
I think it's important that we said kind of what Mina just laid out, that sentence isn't fatal to the PRD application about the neighborhood character in a way that I think, Ravi, you're kind of framing that it may be.
No, I don't think it's fatal at all. I think it's one of the things we have to consider. I think we certainly could grant this. Do we have to grant it? Because it made the
a discretionary permit. We don't have to grant it.
Right. And the 11.6 also says we may require things that are in addition to the minimum standards of the bylaw in order to grant a special permit. So, you know, I'm not saying that I think the detraction from visual quality is fatal, but I think it's a factor that we're weighing that needs to be addressed.
Okay, fair enough. Jim, I'm going to put you on the spot because you know, you're maybe helping decide this vote here. Ravi and I are on different ends. So what do you think? No pressure.
Well, I think it's got to be a unanimous vote, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, maybe you can convince one of us one way or the other.
You know, what, let me actually ask a question that I thought I knew the answer to, but just in the mound of information here, I haven't been able to find it. Which is just a technical question first, and then I'll try to respond to your thoughts. Just can somebody remind me if we assume that the current grade was the grade and the 35 feet had to be measured from there, how far above that or would we be with these houses?
You mean if the grade was,
If the grade was, if we didn't have this issue with the grade and we didn't grant the waiver, I mean, and we had to grant the waiver
oh,
for
I
sure.
see what you're saying.
Because we, you know, I'm just
Mhm.
trying to, I know it's in here someplace. I just can't find it right now.
Madam Chair, can I just
Yeah,
get
yeah, go ahead.
clarity on the question? So is the question, if there had not been excavation, what would be the height waiver? Or is the question from the
Question is,
level-
if you assume there's no excavation and now you're measuring 35 feet from the existing grade, how
Understood.
much above that are you with the buildings?
Zero. We're actually below it. Matt can answer that precisely, but the answer to your question is zero.
Well, then I'm asking the wrong question. If we're taking the site as it currently exists and saying that as it currently exists, that's the base.
Okay, that's a different question.
Sorry.
I think the answer on the duplex is no waiver is required at all. As to the others, I'm going to defer to Matt Leidner.
Okay, thank you. I'm Matt Leidner with Civil Design Group. Good evening, everybody. So it's variable. It varies by building. So as Bill had mentioned, the duplex, the building farthest to the left on the plan actually is under the 35 feet, even if you measure it from existing grade, because it's actually in a proposed cut. So there's no question or even issue or discussion with that particular building. As you work your way to the right, though, it's variable. The worst case scenario building is it's just over 50 feet if you were to measure it from the grade that exists out there today before the restoration of the site to what we are proposing.
50 feet, right, versus
Right.
35. Right.
But the proposed home is not more than 35 feet tall, just to be clear. I think we all understand that, but this is not an excessively tall home. It's a typical colonial home. But if you measure it from that existing grade before we restore the site.
Right. No, I hear you.
Yep.
But the waiver, just to be clear, the waiver that is really on how the height is being measured here, not saying we're allowing a 50-foot house. I mean, isn't
Correct.
that what we're asking for in the
That's
waiver?
exactly right.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
Matt, if I might, Madam Chair, just to get clarity on your answer. So are you saying that you're starting at 50 and then coming up 35, so your delta is 15 feet? Or are you saying you've got to come up 50 feet from the existing grade to restore it to where it was, and then you go from there?
No, so in round numbers, we have to build the grade. To restore the site, we are building the grade up at that particular building by approximately 15 feet. And then the home is sitting on that, which is what creates the 50 feet to the ridge of the home from the existing grade as of today.
Got it.
Well, thank you.
And can I add one thing to that? Matt, I believe in that case that you just described, when you at the restored grade, that's still lower than the grade prior to the gravel mining by significant amount.
Yes, so every home on this project, every building on this project is in a cut relative to the pre-existing grade from before the site was mined. So relative to the grade before any grading took place on the site, these buildings are all in a cut. So there's no no question on the height at all. They're all under 35 feet relative to that grade.
And
Right.
if I might, one more thing for Mr. Smith. I believe also, with the exception of the duplex as originally proposed, it's now proposed to be lower than the ridge line. And I believe all of the other structures were proposed, tops of the elevations were below those ridge line, that existing ridge line as well. And so that's all. I apologize, Mr. Smith. I want to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. That's helpful. Thank you. The other question I have, Elizabeth, is what are we, I mean, I see a bunch of people here. Are we deliberating, or are we having further public comment, or what's the deal here?
We'll have further public comment. We have heard a lot of it. We've received a lot of it. When
I've read all the letters and I've listened to all the tapes. I'm aware of that. I just
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
No, I'm just, when I open a public comment, I will make this point again that we have read, heard. You can trust us that we've processed a lot of it. Jim, other questions before we move on?
Well, I think I don't mind hearing the public comment. I guess I'll make a couple of observations. Part of this, I think, is the fact that I happen to live in a planned residential development in the town of Concord, which was created in the 1970s. So long before any of these laws were revised and changed. One of the factors is that I think that and I'm not precisely sure of this, but I believe this to be the case, that the number of units are roughly the same number of units that you could have put into this particular section in a subdivision. So it's not additional density.
Correct,
And
but Jim, can I stop you there? Just to say that the reason for that is the deed restriction, correct, from Sudbury? So correct me if I'm wrong, anyone?
That's right, but I don't think that's a problem.
Actually,
No, I'm just saying that framing the property as it is, why that has happened, yeah.
No, I understand that. That's again, what I'm saying is that I think that we've talked about properties where you could have more density, potentially get to this issue. I guess the question I'm going to is the issue of, is this ordinary within sort of recent PRDs of the town of Concord? And how are we thinking about that? A little bit. And in my mind, I think that all of these, and I won't bore you with the details of my particular PRD, but about, I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe, or maybe this was a pandemic thing, I don't know, but I literally drove around the town of Concord to every PRD that had ever been created. Just to try to get a kind of idea what had happened over the 50 years or whatever we'd had the PRD law. Nothing scientific, whatever. But I think that as I looked at some of them that I thought were really, excellent, and some of them that I thought were not so good, I don't think that it was any particular one factor, or even whether or not they barely met the qualifications versus they sort of exceeded the qualifications in some respect. I think a lot of it had to do with the particular site that was being dealt with, and thinking about how that site might be appropriately and properly developed if it wasn't a PRD, so that it's a regular subdivision. Because I don't think that it's the case that nothing will happen to any of these sites. And so I think, and all I will say there, and then I'm happy to go to public comment, is that my sense here is that I agree with some of the comments in the letter that Elizabeth and Delia put together. I mean, I think that there are substantial benefits to the PRD, notwithstanding the fact that it quote unquote meets the minimum standards. And I think there's substantial benefits compared to not the sort of what's there now, although I think there's some benefits to that as well, but also compared to what I could conceive and would be there. We've turned down some PRDs where I think that I felt like, you know, a standard subdivision would be an improvement over the PRD. I guess my inclination, I'm happy to hear more testimony before making a final decision. My inclination here is to see this as one where it does improve against the potential alternatives for the development of this site. So that's where I am.
Elizabeth, can I just make one comment?
Absolutely, go ahead.
As we get into the decision making, everyone should take a careful review of 11.6, I think. And maybe town council at the appropriate time would want to weigh into that, because it's the words are shall be granted on a special permit if blah, blah, blah. And I'm suggesting to you that in this case, I think the board would be, from my perspective, would be hard pressed to say that other things outweigh the language of the section 11.6. So we can come back to that, but at some point, I think we ought to be very sensitive to 11.6, and maybe town council can weigh in on that, because my experience was you need to be pretty careful about rejecting a special permit application if the conditions are met.
Yamina, do you want to weigh in on that now?
I can very briefly. I agree completely with Mr. Swaim on that. That's the standard for a special permit. If the conditions are met, the special permit should be granted. I'll just add section 11.6 is sort of second, an additional test here. But the same point that I made earlier with respect to the detailed pieces matters. If there is a finding that the benefit does not, again, the benefit is not sufficient to outweigh the detriment under the factors in 11.6, that has to be tied again to particular facts, and where those particular facts only result from where those particular facts are covered in more detail in section 10 with the PRD, and that's really what this kind of development is, that should instruct the board in how they make those how they weigh those things. So it gets a little bit tricky because, again, the 11.6 standards are admittedly broader in nature, but they're the way to think about them is with respect to the more detailed provisions.
Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to open public comment. Again, we have read and we have heard what has been said the last hearing. So if people could add on or not repeat, that would be fantastic. I am going to start with Mr. Parker. If you could say your name and address.
Hi, Jeffrey Parker, 315 Plainfield, Concord. Yeah, I'll try and be really brief. I just want to say that this is definitely a detriment to the neighborhood. I think everyone in this neighborhood will agree. I think you guys don't have enough information. That's really when I hear people discuss it, I feel like, you know, we need to have a site walk from the Concord side. Look at the Rookery, look at all, there's 800 plus acres of open space here that these buildings will tower over if they get a height exemption. And I think you just need to see it. We can have a site walk. Some neighborhood people can put it together where town council and the board can, just a 20-minute walk. You can see where these buildings will be if they get a height exemption. They're going to tower over this 800 acres. You'll be able to see them all on the trails where now you can't see anything. A lot of, this is, anyway, it's an amazing area, and I hate to see it get impacted like this. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I will go back to that point, but is there anyone else with their hand up? Elizabeth, Haley, you see anyone? Oh, Mr. Johnson?
Hi, Nick Johnson, 38 Bolton Street.
Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a new point. I don't want to regurgitate old information for the benefit of time. Robbie made a point that if all we did was focus on just the law, we would let the lawyers sort it out in a court of law. There's another piece to this, and that is the board that's organized here. So the X variable, as I see it from a citizen, is that what they're presenting is ultimately changing or altering the view, the topography for not just local residents, but visitors to protected lands who will be seeing this as well. So we are penultimately, irrevocably changing the topography, and the only people standing in the way of saying we don't need this. This is a detriment, maybe not according to the law, but there is a human factor that I would like to consider, and I think that's the board making this decision. So I just wanted to emphasize that to the group, and that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. I see Jim. Oh, you're muted.
Jim Ricker, 68 Shore Drive. I don't know why my last name didn't go on there. Anyway, it seems to me that this developer bought the land from the town of Sudbury, and Sudbury said you can put 6 units on it. I don't believe there are any conditions that said you also will have the right to radically change the look of the land. We have 2 PRDs in town that I'm aware of that are built in gravel pits, one off Lexington Road and one off 62. And they have been very successful projects from what I can gather. The ability for this developer to go and rip out mature trees on the ridge and put houses there simply is an opportunity to sell them at a higher price. I understand that. But nowhere was that ever considered to be something that the town of Concord would permit. I think there's enough subjective language in the bylaws that says you have the right to turn this down for a variety of reasons that impact the neighborhood, impact the quality of life and so forth. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I don't think it boils down to strictly a set of engineering plans. That seems to be where we're headed. And I would really urge the board to understand the nature of this land that's being impacted. And if you haven't walked it and don't understand what the nature trails in there are like and what the species are like, you should table this until you do that. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? I do not see any. Am I missing anyone, Haley, Elizabeth?
No, I don't. No.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. Okay, so I think we are where we are with property in general, which can be in a very emotional conversation here. Here's where I'm coming at this, and I think you can back into this legally. You could back out of it legally. We can make the legal argument kind of different ways here. I'm looking at it in a more practical point of view. Would it be better if there was nothing here? Sure. Is it a piece of private property that someone bought and has the right to develop? Yes. Conversations about towering over and ruining all this land, to me, are very emotional conversations, and I get it because I wish there was nothing on this land. I'm with you, but it is a legal conversation. They have the right to do something, and I am not there with evidence, and we can look again at the elevations, that granting this is going to cause these massive buildings to be overpowering this area. I'm not there in emotional. I think it's an emotional argument. I'm not there on the evidence of that. I have walked the land. Open to other conversations. Do I think it's going to be an award-winning best PRD ever? No. Do I think it's a zoning mechanism that they're using as opposed to a subdivision that given us a little more than we would get with the subdivision? Yes. Do I think it gives us what we probably, at least on our side, would like, which is nothing? No, but we're not going to get to nothing on this piece of land. So I'm looking for a best solution here, and in my mind, the PRD we should grant the PRD. Robbie.
Can we pull up the elevations?
Sure.
Of Elizabeth?
I don't know who can
We
do
can
that.
do that.
I could, Madam Chair. I don't know whether Elizabeth has them handy or maybe Matt.
No, so the building elevations or the
Yeah, it's
the cross-section elevations?
no, the
Yeah,
building.
cross-section.
The building
So,
elevations.
Oh,
The
It's-
building elevations, but showing the tree lines and all
No,
that.
no, it's called
Okay.
floor plans elevations. It's the pictures of what the house is gonna look like. Yeah,
Okay.
that one. Can we go to, no,
Sorry.
it's, there's another one with pictures. It's like the fourth one under the heading. Oh, you went too far. Yeah, right there, floor plans elevations at the top.
Yeah, yep, there.
There we go. And you can,
Yep.
you know, look at page 4, for example, or you know, I think I heard it said that these are like normal colonial size homes. To me, this is a 3-story house. You know, we've also had applicants in the past who have redesigned their homes to look more like the colonials that are in the neighborhood. And, you know, I think I made the comment last meeting, these are tall houses. When I look at that, I see a tall house. And, you know, I would like to ask the applicant, is there any openness from the applicant to redesign these houses so that the 3rd floor is not, you know, a 3rd story on the house? You know, you've got space to go sideways as well here, I think. A lot of homes in Concord have kind of the 2nd floor tucked under the eaves and some attic space maybe, but not that high of a 3rd level.
Fair question, Robbie. Let's throw it to the applicants.
I mean, it's not a 3rd level. If you're asking, can we change the pitch of the roof? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I didn't think there was a 3rd story, so why do you need to have the roof be that tall? You know, can you bring the ridge line of the house down 3 to 4 feet? We've had that in the past, and I think there are homes that are, you know, of this size that don't have that kind of massing.
I mean, that's
you know, I know the builder has these prefab homes where it's like
Right.
the model and it's all pre-constructed, right? So I don't know if you have other models that don't look like this.
I mean,
Well, Chris, before you get there, if I might, Madam Chair, through you, I mean, will that make a difference? I mean, I don't want to get into a, you know.
Yeah, no, I understand, Mr. Henchy, and what I'm saying to you is, I think that I've heard very clearly from all the other board members that they are over the line on this project. I've heard from town council that he certainly doesn't want to be defending this in litigation if I say no. I've heard from all the town staff that they see benefit to this and that they like it. But I've also heard very clearly from the neighborhood and everybody from the public that's commented that, you know, if we can mitigate what they're looking at when they're across the wetlands or when they're walking on the conservation land, that would help address some of the concerns that we've been hearing. So for me, I said last meeting, I wasn't there yet on the advantages for this PRD. I got the letter from the town, which was helpful, but I think just kind of restated facts that were already in the record. And as I said, you know, I don't think that I was held up on the height waiver issue. So if we are able to lower the height of these homes, I think that could get me over the line, yes.
So I have a question for Matt Leidner, my civil engineer. I know the duplex, which is the one that building that was the major concern really of the public. We pulled that back. It's in a cut environment or from a siting standpoint. And it's also at the highest point from going from the left to the right. So as you go from, I think the foundation at elevation at the duplex is at 160. And as you go to the right, it drops down to, I don't remember the number.
145 and a half, Chris. It's down 15 feet.
So it's dropping 15 feet, and the ridge line that blocks the homes from the rookery area is consistent all across from going from left to right. So I'm not sure the single family homes that are on home sites 65432 are the homes that are of concern. It was really the duplexes as I understood it, but Matt, maybe you can comment on that.
I guess I don't have much more to offer. I think you stated it accurately as I understood it, which is that the duplex, the farthest building to the left on the plan, was of the most concern based on the comments we heard. And as you work your way to the right, the buildings get the bottom of the buildings, the base elevation drops as you go to the right, and the berm that's behind all the buildings kind of stays consistent. So they become more and more screened, just based on that berm as you work your way to the right, the single family homes. And that duplex, which is the one that seems to have been of the most concern because it is the highest, and the buffer behind it is the narrowest, behind that building. That is the one building that actually does not exceed the height, even if it were to be measured from the grade that exists out there today.
But we, in our last hearing, we modified the location of that duplex, pulling it further away from the ridge line, which allowed us to preserve more of the existing trees and pulled it further away from the ridge line.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm hearing that all the houses are of concern, from the vantage point of the neighbors, you can already see the Sudbury duplexes. And these are going to be that much closer to that berm. And it looks like the massing is greater than the Sudbury duplexes. So that's why I think it would be a positive, mitigation to at least lower the profile of what they will see.
I mean, it's not I mean, I can.
I mean, Chris, let me jump in here. I think I appreciate the question from a purely self-interested point of view, and that's what I'm obviously here to do. I don't think I should have my client bidding against himself at a board hearing, especially not knowing that if he does so, that'll result in a yes from the member of the board who was expressing reservations. I'm not suggesting that it would be an inappropriate thing for my client to consider. And I think there's engineering considerations involved. I don't think it's fair to just try to answer
No, I
that.
don't think you can answer that, but my question was, are you open to it, right?
So what I would say is, having represented these guys for many years now, it's always been my experience that they prefer to work with communities. That's why we're here now. That's why we propose all of this mitigation and basically have given the town everything that it's asked for. And if there was a way to do this, I'm certain that they would be open to considering it. I don't want to make that promise here. Ultimately, it's up to Chris and not up to me. In all candor, we all walked the site and we all saw the elevation of the ridge, and we presented all of these cross sections to the board, which show clearly that as you move from left to right across the development of 6 homes, 6 units, it was the duplex that was the one that was of the greatest concern at the site visit and during the board hearings. And my client made a significant concession to redesign that one already. And I have to say this, in looking at what the test is here, whether or not the PRD proposal is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the bylaw, that's the ultimate test. And as I think we've pointed out more than once, we've met every single one of the substantive design standards here. And I think that's how you get to the place of determining whether or not an application is in harmony and with the general purposes and intent of the bylaw. To Mina's earlier commentary, the specific provisions of the bylaw govern versus the general ones. And, I suggest we've met those. Robbie, in all candor, I don't know what to say to your request. It's not up to me. I know that my clients have always tried to work, but I just have to say, it gets to a point after, how many planning board hearings do we have where this thing was subject to microscopic levels of review, and how many of these hearings we.
And listen, it's how it goes. You start
Yeah.
with us and we're kind of starting fresh. And I wouldn't
Right.
say that our conversations have been fruitless. And I think that Robbie's points are valid. And I think that his approach is valid in what he's asking. If you don't mind, Mr. Henchy, I'd like to discuss with Jim and Tom on the board their thoughts on it. I understand that right here you couldn't redesign the project, and I also understand that you feel like you're doing things and nothing's going forward. And I would say that that's not the case, that we are moving forward.
Okay.
Jim and Tom.
I just have one factual question. The Sudbury units are higher than these houses would be, aren't they?
Think so.
Is the roof line of units 3, 4, 5, and 6 at the same level of the Sudbury units?
I think it's higher, Matt.
The row of units in Sudbury that are parallel to the town line, so basically the closest row of units in Sudbury to this development, the heights of those buildings and the foundation elevations of those buildings are very similar. So they sort of mimic what these Concord buildings would be.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I submitted an analysis of this some time ago to the board. My recollection was that on the left side by the duplex, they were basically equivalent, but on the right side, as you moved over, the Sudbury houses were 2 to 3 feet higher on average, the tops of the foundations.
Let me ask Jim if he has any further thoughts on this first. Jim.
Sure. So I'm thinking about a project that was not a PRD. It was simply a single family house that was on a non-conforming lot and was going to exceed more than 50% and all that. So it was before us for a special permit, and ultimately it was reduced, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet in height. And it made a difference in that particular area. It certainly did. I think it's a fair point to ask at this stage I think it's a fair point for the applicant to ask at this stage whether or not, if they went back and did the work and decided that they could come forward with reduced height on some of these homes, if that would be the thing that could get them across the line. I think it's worth their asking that question. I think they would probably, I appreciate the fact that if we're not going to get a unanimous vote on this project, even if they did that work, that it's fair to suggest to them that they shouldn't have to do the work. But just as a matter of how I think we try to do our work here. I do think that the plan, one of the pieces of the PRD is that design is open, but is open for discussion. When a planning board does a subdivision, just about any home can be built there, as long as it meets the various requirements. And so I think that that's, you know, an important factor here is that we do have some control, or the planning board at least has some control over these, the things that are being built. But to me, this has long been not about what does the house necessarily look like from the road or from the front yard of the house. It's always been about what does it look like when you're coming across this field or the rookery, et cetera, the conservation land. And we know that these houses are at least partially partially cut off by the ridge, right? So, I think that Robbie's focus on the roof line is an important one, because I think that's where some of the, that's where the biggest part of the massing we're going to see, I think. So, so just a couple of factors. I mean, I think that I still believe that through the PRD process, we can achieve something that is better than can be achieved through the subdivision process. And I agree with Elizabeth that we're not, that nothing is sort of not an option here. So, maybe if we could, I don't know, Ravi, if you think that if we could play a little bit with the roof line and the height that could get us there, or something that it's worth having these guys, asking these guys if they'll go back and at least look at it.
Yeah, no, I thought I'd answered that, but I'll say it again. Yes, I think that if we can bring the roof line down and the massing is mitigated from when you're looking at it, from the conservation land, from Plainfield Road, from coming along 117, I think that gets me over the line. I mean, obviously I have to see the new design, but yes, I can say that.
That's what I thought I heard you say, but I was just double checking.
Thanks.
My concern on this discussion though, Jim and Robbie, is I've done a lot in the construction world. They may be able to bring that down 1 foot, maybe 2 feet, because I've been in some cases like that. But if the standard's going to be 4 or 5 feet, they may or not be able to meet that. So is it fair to them not to have some guidelines over, what would be in a passable level?
Well,
I
Robert,
think
you're looking for something that has
I
impact.
would think we'd want to hear the reason why 4 to 5 feet isn't achievable, if that's really true. But I would, it's Pulte Homes, right? They gotta have 1 million models, right? Or more than 3.
There's no, let me just interrupt there. There's no agreement with Pulte Homes with regard to this at all. This is my client's development. I'm not saying that it might not.
I don't know who's supplying the houses.
Right. So I think, to the last comment about 1 to 2 feet, I think we could make that happen. The 4 to 5 feet, we can't make that happen. So if 1 to 2 feet, if that works for you, Robbie, then we'll get to work.
Like I said, it's hard for me to say, just like it's hard for you to on the spot say that this is the new design. It's hard for me to say that, okay, this new massing makes sense, but I think if you do the work and get as low as you can, I'm saying it can get me over the line.
Well, for Robbie, though, it has
1
to
to
have
2 feet
some sort
doesn't
of
sound
visual
like.
impact. See, for you to, I
Right.
mean, getting you over the line means that there's some visual impact, whether a foot is going to give you visual impact, and
I don't know.
not being able to do it means that you're, but what'd you say?
Yeah, but it's hard for me to say that without seeing it.
No, but I think we're getting down to
it.
it. How much are you willing to
Yeah.
adjust your designs? And I'm hearing not very much. By saying we can't do it, then it's that, they are where they are, and you want us to vote on where you are. I think that's kind of what I'm reading. Because
mean, I
Robbie's
think
basically saying to you, if you get to
I think you're right. We can commit to make it work at 1 to 2 feet coming out of the roof line. We can't cut anything out of the foundation, lowering the foundations,
No.
having to do a major redesign of the civil work. And I
No,
know,
it's about ceiling heights, roof design, pitch. Or if you have another model home that you can dial up that doesn't have that height on the third story, you know, I don't know what you have, right? You gotta tell me
Right.
what you can do.
oh,
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm gonna lay it out as a cost benefit analysis. If you think you have a legal argument and you want us to vote on it, I mean, and we think that, yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
wait,
Can I also ask a question of Mr. Leider? If Mr. Clausen is saying that, you know, they can work with the architecture and the roof pitch and bring it down, you know, a foot or two. There's also the would slightly shifting the homes a little bit more forward. Would that also help reduce the height?
Forward, would mean forward.
So right now,
Shifting like you did the duplex,
yeah,
right?
the homes are set back probably
From the ridge.
35 feet from the edge of the road. If they were to be moved a little bit more forward, would that also help with the height?
So I appreciate the question. And if I may, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So, these homes are basically in what is the bottom of the existing gravel pit excavation. So I think in terms of the height that we're talking about and, you know, the measurement, the interpretation that the measurement would be from the grade that exists out there today and not before any grading occurred. I don't think, Elizabeth, that would really make a difference. It's sort of, we're in the floor of this excavation, so pulling them forward, the grade that exists today is essentially the same as where they are now. And the one unit where it would make a difference, not in terms of the height, but just in terms of the you know, the buffering and the depth of the existing trees to remain and the number of existing trees to remain. We've committed to pull that building, which is 2 of the homes, forward to save a substantial number of trees and buffer.
Okay, I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
I think that gets back to my point earlier, Elizabeth, that the single family homes are at such a lower elevation than the duplex that's on the farthest left-hand side. What Matt's saying is if you pull them further away, they're already below, you know, the ridge line is already blocking most of the homes as it is. So there's no benefit to it. So,
All right, let's, Ravi, why don't we do this? Can we take a look at the cross section with the trees and understanding that we've heard from, I don't know what it's called.
Sure, I will bring that up.
I just want to, for reference and understanding, we remember what the neighbors said about this rendering and maybe not being reflective of everything, but I'd like to just take a look at it because we keep talking about that building. All right, proposed home 3.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I think those have been updated, Elizabeth, with the proposed replantings. I've got them if you can't find them quick.
This is the one.
I don't know who you want to speak to this, Elizabeth.
Just when you're saying, okay, so the duplex, let's point out the duplex. What is proposed home number one is
The duplex.
the duplex. Okay.
And so this
I-
where it was previously, and then the board asked that it be pulled back. And this is the additional tree area that was saved by pulling it back.
mean, I
If I may, the dashed black line that sort of runs right through the building,
Right here.
that is the existing grade today. And the proposed is where the brown shading is. So that's what we've been saying, is that this is in a proposed cut relative to today's grade, and even more so relative to the existing grade before any grading took place with the gravel operation. So that's the existing grade. The red is where we had the duplex. The black outline that's shaded gray is where we've committed to pull the duplex forward toward the street more. That's the location of it. And every horizontal line on that grid that this is placed on, every horizontal line is a 10-foot grade increment, elevation increment.
Right,
And-
so looking at this, it gives us a little sense of a foot or two, Robbie, to your point, you know.
Yeah, so if you were asking me, I'd say 3 to 4 feet, I'm good. 1 to 2 feet, I gotta look at the massing and see what the difference is, because I can't commit to something like that on the spot here.
But this is the duplex, which is significantly lower than the other dwellings to begin with.
Let's see, do we have the other dwellings, or is that the only one we have with that cross section?
So can I just say, if we're going to say that the measurement needs to be taken from existing grade as of today, that building's only 20 some odd feet tall then.
So,
Okay.
listen, we're getting into very subjective territory here, and I don't think Robbie's wrong in the sense that this is a discretionary permit, and being uncomfortable with the massing, again, Mina, you can speak to whether you would want to defend this in court, but I don't, discretionary permit seems to me means it's discretionary. We can consider these things, and that there has been considerable public pushback, and it is altering the terrain. However, I now also am uncomfortable that we're getting into these little minute changes here and there that I'm not sure I want to engage in this, or that it's going to make a difference one way or the other visually.
Elizabeth, if I could, just, I know it's been come up
Please.
twice in sort of
Yeah.
this form. I just want to be very clear. I don't view the standard as whether town council wants or doesn't want to defend. That's not the standard. I just want to be absolutely clear about that.
Sorry. Yeah, no.
And I, that's not my job. My job is to
Right.
advise you as best as I can. And if there is a defense to be had, to do that the best I can. I think the issue that is coming up that I would suggest the board focus on. First, I do want to step back. This came up in the public comments, and I think you hinted at this. Your role is as a quasi judicial board, and so you are applying law to the facts as you see them. So I think everybody seems to be on the same page there. But that does make trying to interpret these words a little bit harder. The thing to focus on here is when you're talking about the detriment to the neighborhood or what may seem like more subjective factors, a lot of the discussion tonight has nonetheless focused on height. And so if you're going back to height, and that's I think, Ravi, to your point, it's, I appreciate it's hard for you to tell whether 1 foot or 3 feet is enough, because you're saying it's not about the height in this particular case. It's what the height does for that particular view. I think those are two separate things necessarily. I'm not sure if at the end of the day, that's something you you end up, you have to decide whether it meets of each of the factors. But again, I would go through those and see if that's if you're there. Does that help?
Yeah, that is very helpful. And I think that's why we're kind of talking about massing, not height here. But I think that 3 to 4 feet on the ridge line will make a difference in the massing of these homes.
Jim, Tom, any thoughts on that?
Not probably much. I mean, I'm still. I obviously, we all wish there was, and I think this is true for everyone. We wish there's a way we could, satisfy every single person here about this issue. I'm still personally of the view that that this is what's been done here is sufficient to persuade me that that's far superior to the subdivision. If I could get more reduced massing, if I could get more reduced height to continue to sort of block this from the other view, I would absolutely support that as well, because I think you can always make these projects better. And I've seen in Concord situations where the project is better as a consequence of applicants having taken those steps. So to me, it's really on very much on a close line, but I guess I would still, I'd like to see if there was anything else that could be done, but at the same time, I think that, I'm hard pressed to say that it would be, that as a practical matter, it would be worth turning this down, even if there was not a lawsuit, but instead there was just a subdivision. And I think the subdivision would be problematic for a lot of those reasons.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, Mr. Henchy.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a request of the board. One piece of information, we've asked the planning board to entertain our definitive subdivision plan. We're on the agenda for the third week in March, I think, to discuss that. But on this one, could I ask the board for maybe this is unusual in your process, but would it be possible for me to have a 5-minute call with my client and Mr. Leidner? Maybe the board could take care of some minutes or something like that, and just give it the
I'm
chance to
fine with
talk
that.
about from here. Okay.
Procedurally, are we okay with that, Elizabeth? Yeah.
You can always recess, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Let's recess. We'll recess. Can we do our minutes while if we're in recess?
You can certainly jump to those and
We don't have to recess. We can just do the.
Not to
vote.
recess.
Let's
if
just
we
do the
jump in.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Henchy, the answer is yes. Thank you. We will.
All right, thank you. So we'll take a quick call and we'll jump back online, and you can tell I've sat on a board or two. I know minutes are a nuisance, so happy to help.
Love them. All
you.
right.
So,
yeah.
you also have a third item for which you need
Oh, we have to-
to
yeah, you're right.
formally open the public hearing and continue it without discussion to March 23rd at what time, Haley? Sorry.
7:20, Haley, is that right?
Sorry, I was on mute again. 7:20.
7:20. Okay, great. All right. Well, so let's move to 7:10 p.m. Concord Center for the Visual Arts, who have asked for a continuance. Can I have a motion to continue to the March?
I just want to note for the record that I'm recused from that case.
Okay. Can I get a motion from someone else to continue that?
So I move to continue the application of the Concord Center for the Visual Arts for a special permit with site plan review under bylaw section 713, 772, 12, 11, 6, and 11, 8 at 37 Lexington Road to March 23rd at 7:20 p.m.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Faya,
Aye.
Mr. Swaim,
Aye.
Ms. Akers Moore, aye. Great. Now, moving on to the minutes of January 12th. Did everyone submit all the comments? I did not have any comments. I am fine with them.
Yeah, they look good.
Great.
Move approval.
Move approval second.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Faya,
Aye.
and Ms. Akers Moore. Aye. How many minutes was that? Like 2.5? So, it's kind of awkward to recess when you're not in person.
Elizabeth, Elizabeth Hughes, that is are there any upcoming events that we ought to be cognizant of?
So you will be getting an email soon. The Citizens Planner Training Collaborative Annual Conference is coming up in March. That's where they have different workshops on planning and zoning topics, and so I believe, I want to say it's always on a Saturday. It's held at Holy Cross in Worcester, the 18th. So Haley, either Haley or Heather will be sending out, I think it's just a save the date email right now, but so that if any of the board members are interested in going to that, once they let everybody know what the workshops are going to be, you just need to tell Heather and we will process, the registration fee and other than that, I can tell you that should it move forward, it would come back to the Board of Appeals. The owners for 13B Commonwealth Ave, they did a combined business resident special permit right on the corner of Beharrell and Com Ave in West Concord. Went to the West Concord Advisory Committee and presented a conceptual idea to increase the number of dwelling units. I think going from 8 to 20. My understanding, the members of the West Concord Advisory Committee were, supportive of the project and the redesign. But if the applicant does move forward, it would require an amendment to the special permit and the site plan. So you may be seeing that.
Elizabeth, do you happen to know what the schedule is for reworking Com Avenue in West Concord?
I do know that they are going to be this spring doing the rest of the construction of Com Ave, doing 2 different locations, pedestrian bump outs. So that will be happening this spring. And but I don't know the exact time frame. I'm sorry.
Because am I correct? They planned to do the repaving last fall and just for whatever reasons it didn't get done.
I believe the work that was done by National Grid took longer. So.
Okay.
Well, Elizabeth, I'll ask you a question. Have you heard anything about an amended MBTA regulations about on the zoning? That they're going to be, yeah, go ahead.
Amending
About it.
the MBTA communities
Yeah,
requirement?
the MBTA, yeah.
For the legislation or the guidelines?
For the legislation. That would
I have not. I
would
have
it
not
extend
heard.
the area out further from the MBTA lines. No, you haven't heard anything.
No, currently there's 175 communities that are subject to the new Section 3A guidelines. You have your MBTA communities and then there's adjacent communities. But I have not heard that they're gonna amend it to go further than that.
Elizabeth, I haven't either, but just to
Yeah.
maybe suggest where that might be coming from. The deadline for what's called first filed bills in the State House that get filed at the beginning of a session was about a week or two ago. It's
Uh-huh.
not unusual. And in fact, up until the MBTA zoning a couple of years ago, it would usually lead to nothing for zoning reform legislation to be filed right at the beginning of the session.
Okay.
So it's possible that I haven't seen it. We can certainly look, but
Yeah.
possible that there was an expansion contemplated.
Yeah.
But that it would be a far cry from anything being close to done. They usually won't act on bills for another 6 or 7 months
Got it.
of that kind, aside from small things. So
Yeah. All right. Well, that's why it's good to not listen to rumors and to find out facts. I see that our applicants are back. So let's get going. Mr. Hitchens.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can I ask a question? When's the board's next meeting? Just because we enjoy this so much, we would like to do it as soon as possible.
March 20th. Is that right?
Yeah.
23rd?
Yes.
23rd.
Yeah, the board's meeting is, it's typically the second Thursday of the month, but because of public hearings for annual town meeting, they are not allowed to meet. So it is the 23rd of March.
Okay. And you wouldn't consider a special meeting just for us, would you?
Have we done that before? We haven't done that while I've been on the board.
I believe the only time the board has done that before. I think it's been done a couple of times for like comprehensive permits, held, special meetings. But yeah, it would be up to the board and we would have to check town meeting schedule because it's not just the public hearings that they can't meet on. They can't meet on the designated snow dates either so the planning board's public hearing is March 7th. And, I believe the snow date is March 8th. So, a board or committee can't meet on either date.
What did you have in mind, Mr. Henchy? What date were you looking at?
Here's what I was going to suggest, Madam Chair. I've had a conversation with Chris and Matt, and we're agreeable. We can't commit as we sit here now to make any changes to the application. But Chris is agreeable to going to see what he can do with the architecture. The site design, I got to tell you, is difficult because it's all tied to the elevations on the rest of the site, to the ridge line, and the stormwater design is all tied to that. So that stuff is all tied together. However, I think Chris is willing to take a look at other architectural designs to try to address Robbie's concerns. And we'd obviously would like to get his vote. And the rest of the board, has expressed that they would like to get more if they could, right? So why don't we are amenable to attempting to do that. In candor, I can't make any commitment about it, but I think we'd be able to accomplish that in reasonably short order. And rather than going another month, because we do have a planning board hearing scheduled on the definitive plan. And if we were able to get an approval here, we would withdraw that so that we would stick with the PRD as we've committed to do from the beginning. But so I don't know, a couple of weeks, Madam Chair, if that would work for the board members, but I understand you have regular schedules to keep to, and I get all of that, but we have been at this a very long time at this point in time.
I appreciate that from the applicant. It's something I would be willing to meet earlier because I appreciate the effort that you guys are going through. So Jim and Robbie, who would be voting, would you be able to make another day?
Certainly, yes, and I appreciate it too. Thank you. And I think
Yeah.
we get a deal.
I'm just
Right,
looking.
we'll get there.
Yeah.
The 23rd?
I'm just looking.
The 23rd would work for me. Does that give us enough time for noticing and everything? It should, right?
You're saying the 23rd of February?
Yes.
Uh,
Is that okay, Chris?
Let's see if, sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
So noticing's not an issue. You're just going to continue this public hearing to
Got
the 23rd of February. I want to check the town calendar real quick.
Sure. And Jim and Robbie said that's okay with you. So
Yes.
Jim,
I'm good.
Tom,
Okay,
we'd love to have you there.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, so far there's nothing on the town calendar. Mina?
It shouldn't drive you one way or another. I personally cannot be available. I can certainly arrange for a colleague to try to do that, but I will be out of the country. This is February 23rd, I assume.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I'll be away that week.
Mina, how's March 2 for you and board
Yeah.
members?
March 2 is, I've noticed, is a snow day for the finance committee hearing, Elizabeth, so I just didn't
Yeah.
know if we're starting to get into
No,
that.
the 23rd, I think is. So. The 23rd works. And then after that, nothing on the 27th, 28th, the 1st or the 2nd. The 7th, 8th, 9th. And Monday.
Well, if the 23rd works, I have to say that I have a very heavy travel schedule at the early part of March. I was very glad to see that our March meeting was not that first week because it would have been extraordinarily difficult for me. So if we could do the 23rd of February and
23rd.
get somebody from town council to join us, while you're fortunate, hopefully in a nice warm place someplace, that would really suit much better. I think getting into March is just going to be a nightmare for me.
23rd at 7, is that what we want to do?
It's good for me. Matt Leidner, what's your schedule?
Good. Good with me.
Okay.
Okay. Bill?
Yep.
All right,
I'm fine,
I
thank
guess we need a motion,
Okay.
Robbie,
So moved.
to the 23rd, February 23rd at 7 PM.
Okay.
Second,
Great.
wait, we haven't voted yet. I got town council on the line. I gotta be official.
Please be official when I'm not here too, but thank you.
Yeah, totally. That's the rest of the board's all lawyers too. It's fine. All right, so Mr. Smith, can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Fahia,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Night.
Ms. Chris Moore, aye. Thank you all very much. I think we are making progress, but slowly we'll get there. So
We'll
thank
see.
you very much for everyone. And I
Thank
think
you.
that concludes everything because we have gone through everything else we need.
Right.
Thank you all. We'll see you the 23rd.
We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.